If you want God for us the freedom and life that a relationship with God brings, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Paul says, break with the past. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world. By the world, he means the world that has shut God out. One translation puts it like this: don't let the world around you squeeze you into its mold. In other words, dare to be different.
All the time.
No.
No.
I do what I like to do.
Not that much.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
I think we all do. I think it's part of humanity to conform and to be like other people.
It's always this noise in the back of my brain that's always like, do this, do this, do this. Everything has to be this way, this way, this way.
Absolutely not.
I don't feel pressure to conform because I'm happy with who I am.
I don't conform to anything.
Well, everybody feels the pressure to conform.
I want to say that I don't, but I definitely do.
I mean, I was just born with whatever spirit I have, and I used to get in trouble for it, but now it's helpful, so.
The pressures of this world are so heavy. I think everyone wants to fit in.
At this stage of life, I pretty much know who I am and what I love, so I don't feel that pressure.
I'm just myself. I love my rainbow color fashion, just vibrant vibes.
I usually go feel the pressure and I go with it, and then I get home and I'm like, why did I do that? And then repeat.
There was a young police officer who was doing his final exams. The first few questions in the paper were relatively easy, but then he got to question 4. Question 4 went like this. You're on patrol when an explosion occurs in the gas main in a nearby street. On investigation, you find that a large hole has been blown in the footpath, and there's an overturned van lying nearby. Inside the van, there's a strong smell of alcohol. Both occupants, a man and a woman, are injured. You recognize the woman as the wife of your divisional inspector, who is at present away in the United States. A passing motorist stops to offer you assistance, and you realize that he's a man who's wanted for armed robbery. Suddenly, another man runs out of a nearby house shouting that his wife is expecting a baby, and the shock of the explosion has made the birth imminent. Another man is crying for help, having been blown into an adjacent canal by the explosion, and he cannot swim.
Boy.
Describe in a few words what actions you would take.
This is like an episode of Chicago Fire.
Picked up his pen and wrote, I would take off my uniform and mingle with the crowd.
That's one
There's a lot of pressure in everyday life to mingle with the crowd, to kind of blend in for the sake of an easy life, but we're called to be different, to take a different approach. Now, being different doesn't mean being weird. You don't have to speak in weird religious language or wear strange clothes. Just be yourself. Be authentic. As Oscar Wilde once said, be yourself. Everyone else is taken. Jesus was the most authentic, most normal person who ever lived. He was the most fully integrated human being. And Paul says, do not conform any longer. In other words, move on from the past. Make a clean break. Being yourself is ultimately liberating.
I don't know about you, but sometimes I think we have a fear of change. Perhaps you came to Alpha because you saw a change in a friend or a family member. Something about their life seemed attractive, and you wanted to find out why. But at the same time, you're thinking, not sure I want to become like that. What would it mean to make that change? God's not going to ask you to leave behind stuff that's good. He wants the very best for your life. He only asks you to leave behind the rubbish in your life so you can take hold of all the treasure he has in store for you.
One of the treasures Paul mentions is sincere love. St. Paul writes, love must be sincere. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. The literal Greek word is anupokritos, which means without hypocrisy. And that was the word used in Greek plays when the actor wore a mask. That was called eupokritos, from which we get the word hypocrite. And I suppose this mask is what we put forward when we don't want people to see who we really are or kind of how we're really feeling. And we do it with our social media profiles.
No one puts up a photo of themselves looking terrible. We find the best photo we can find with the best lighting and filters. But it's not always real. And the danger is, if we treat life like this, then our relationships and friendships could end up being very shallow or superficial.
But that's not why we were created. We were created for meaningful relationships.
And when I finally understood this, I realized that if God can accept me as I am, even though he knows all the worst things about me, then maybe I can accept myself.
When you realize that God loves you just as you are, you can drop the mask and be yourself. You can be authentic. And that's what it means to be a human being loved by God.
And when that happens, you begin to experience a real connection with other people. And we see this happening in Alpha and the small group as people gradually begin to take their masks down. You know, we often think that we'll impress people with our strengths, but actually we connect with people through our vulnerabilities. And it's when people begin to drop the mask that these amazing, deep friendships begin to form.
Sincere, authentic love is the opposite of superficial love. It's about being the same in different situations, so being consistent and having integrity. It means saying the same thing about someone as you'd say to someone, because sometimes it's tempting to talk about people behind their backs, you know, to gossip about them.
Sincere love means looking to give rather than to get. This applies to every area of life, including our sex lives. God is the most wonderful creator and designer, and he's given the most amazing gifts. He's given the gift of marriage and of sex. Sex was God's idea. He's not surprised by it. He's not looking down and thinking, oh my goodness, whatever will they get up to next? Pleasure is God's invention, not the devil. The devil tries to distort the beautiful things that God creates. And the Bible affirms our sexuality. There's a whole book in the Bible devoted to the subject of love and sex, the delight, contentment, and satisfaction it brings. But the inventor and designer also tells us how this beautiful gift is to be enjoyed to the full. And the biblical context is lifelong commitment within marriage. Jesus quoted the book of Genesis, "For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh." In other words, there's a public act of leaving and a commitment, a gluing together. That's what the Hebrew word means. Glued together. It's not just physically and biologically, but emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and socially. And that is the Christian context for this one flesh union to take place. And in this context, there is freedom and enjoyment. It's exciting, thrilling, and beautiful. It's the most positive view of sex and marriage that exists. Actually, it's by far the most romantic view. And it is God's plan, it's God's purpose. And the designer says, here is this beautiful gift. But don't mess it up, because you can hurt yourself with this. It's so powerful. There's no such thing as casual sex. Every act affects this one flesh union. I sometimes illustrate this by gluing two pieces of corrugated cardboard together, one with a picture of a man, one with a picture of a woman. If you glue them together and then try and pull them apart, you see the damage it causes, the hurt. All around in our society, we see broken hearts, people who are hurting. God doesn't want you to get hurt. And therefore, he's given us this beautiful picture of how things can be and how things should be. The good news is, it's never too late. God loves you. The society that Paul was writing to, like our own society, is one where God's standards were not kept. And they really messed up, and they were hurt and broken. But Paul never condemns them for that. He just says, don't live like this any longer. From now on, live differently. God forgives. This is all about God's love for you. And that's why Jesus died for you, so that the past can be forgiven, so that the past can be wiped clean, so that the scars, if there are scars, can be healed. Jesus wants to restore wholeness to your life and give you a new start. Today can be a new start for you. So, there's sincere love. Another treasure is enthusiasm for God. In Romans 12:11, Paul says, never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. This means keep your spiritual enthusiasm. What matters is the long term.
Invest either in myself or real estate.
Work out more.
Invest in Google, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, buy Bitcoin early.
Trust myself.
Invest in Bitcoin.
Invest in Bitcoin.
Finish high school. Take school serious.
You don't have to go to
Bitcoin.
college.
It's not looking so good right now.
it's not.
And don't give up.
Don't waste time. Don't get a student loan.
Don't worry so much.
Chill out a little bit.
A lot of the stuff that you're worried about, don't trip.
Girl, trust yourself.
Don't do it.
No, do it.
Laugh more.
To have more fun.
Don't be quick to doubt myself.
Be more open-minded.
When everyone's mean to you, don't take it so personal. It's not personal, they just don't know.
Embrace the difference. Embrace the uniqueness.
Spend time with my mom more, and I miss those times.
Love the things that you love and not be ashamed of that.
That you are loved and chosen just the way you are.
Let life happen to you and just take it as it comes.
No one has it figured out. We're all together in that, so.
I don't know if you might have prayed after the last session when there was that opportunity to ask God to fill us with the Holy Spirit. Well, if you did, you may have had an amazing experience of God. Maybe you felt deeply moved as the Holy Spirit touched your heart in a profound way. Maybe you actually found it quite overwhelming.
Or perhaps you feel a bit disappointed. You might say, well, I was hoping I'd have this amazing experience, but to be honest, I don't think I felt much at all.
Or maybe you're just thinking, I found it really difficult. Maybe you're thinking, I didn't find it easy at all. Maybe you felt like running away. Maybe you did run away.
But do you know what? In one sense, it doesn't really matter because feelings will go up and down. And one day you might be feeling great and everything's going really, really well. Then the next day wake up and you just feel awful.
Yeah, and if you wake up on Monday morning feeling terrible after an amazing time this weekend, does that mean that nothing happened? Well, no. It probably just means that you're tired. What matters is your long-term relationship with God.
I grew up as an only child. I was the good church kid. At 18, like so many bad cliches, I rebelled. Became a nightclub promoter. And over the next 10 years, from about 18 to 28, really climbed up New York's social ladder. At 28, I had gotten many of the things that I thought I wanted. My girlfriend was on the cover of magazines, I had a Beamer, I had a Rolex, I had a Labrador Retriever, I had a grand piano in my apartment in New York, and I was so unhappy. Something awakened in me, it was a realization maybe that I would never find happiness where I was looking for it. There would never be enough girls, there'd never be enough drugs, there'd never be enough parties. I guess it was a fresh look, being able to take a look at faith again with fresh eyes. And I became so compelled by a Jesus who went around serving the poor, who went around looking after others and lived a life of integrity. You know, there's this verse in James that I came across that said, true religion is to look after widows and orphans in their distress and to keep yourself from being polluted by the world. So I was 0 for 2. Not only had I done nothing for the poor in a decade, I literally polluted people for a living. I made this radical life move. I wound up selling all of my possessions. I joined this humanitarian mission, group of medical doctors volunteering in West Africa, operating on a huge hospital ship, and I become their photojournalist. I saw a lot of stuff over those 2 years, and I think the thing that struck me the most was people drinking dirty water. Half of the country didn't even have their most basic need for health met. Half the country didn't have clean water to drink. And when I landed back in New York, I was 30. And this was the issue that I felt so compelled to work on. And Charity Water was definitely birthed out of my faith experience, of me returning back to Christ, to God again. And I believe that the idea of Charity Water is very close to God's heart. I believe the idea of a world where every single person drinks clean water is so fluid, is so in line with the heart of God, the heart of the Father. And it's an amazing thing to be able to do with my work. Over the last 9 years, we've raised almost $200 million. We've helped over 5.5 million people around the world get access to clean water, so we've made a little bit of a dent. And most importantly, the number of people without water has come down from 1 billion to 660 million. You know, if I look back on it, I think this idea of really trying to serve God through my work, you know, it's changed everything in my life. But I think, you know, you can do that wherever you are, whether you're a banker, whether you're a florist. You can bring, you know, the kingdom values that you believe in into your work, into the way that you serve your customers, into the way that you lead your team members, into the way that you support others.
Paul says, present your bodies as living sacrifices. Now, this is an act of the will, to offer all of ourselves to God, all of our lives.
And that means giving to God our time, our most valuable possession. When someone puts their faith in Jesus, their priorities change. And relationships become the most important thing. Relationships with people, but also your relationship with God.
Yeah, but giving God all of our time doesn't mean we spend every waking moment reading the Bible and praying.
Yeah, investing time communicating with God will transform your relationship with Him. And investing in relationships with other people is also important. You're not supposed to do this thing on your own. Alpha is just one way of keeping meeting together, but then there's also things like church on Sunday.
We also give to God our ambitions. But should a Christian be ambitious? Well, Jesus' answer to that question is yes. In fact, Jesus commands us to be ambitious. He says, seek first the kingdom of God, and all these other things will be yours as well. In other words, don't make your secondary things your primary ambition.
Yeah, so some people make money their primary ambition. But supposing you get to the end of your life and you've accumulated this massive fortune, and you get to heaven and you stand before God and God asks, what have you done with your life? And you say, well, I've made all this money. And God says, oh, wow, that's great, that's so useful here, we can play Monopoly. I mean, as a secondary ambition, it's great. If you say, I want to make loads of money because I know that I can use it to help the poor, or eradicate disease, and make a difference in this world, that's brilliant. It's a great ambition, but just don't make it your primary ambition. Be generous. You know, giving to others is so liberating.
We give God our time, our money, our ambition, and also our words. And with your words, you can wreck someone's day. You can actually wreck someone's life. But you can also bless people. And it doesn't cost anything, but it can change someone's life. With our mouths, do we put people down or do we encourage them? With our eyes and ears, do we look and listen to stuff that builds us up? And with our hands, do we use them to take or to serve? The paradox is that we think that if we do this, we lose our freedom. But actually, it's the way to find our freedom.
St. Augustine said, serving God is perfect freedom. That's what I've found. The more that I'm serving God, the freer I feel. But there will also be a cost. Present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Jesus didn't come to make life easy. He came to make people great. But there will be challenges. There will be the challenge of leaving behind the rubbish in our lives. The rubbish in our lives is rubbish. But it's hard to leave rubbish behind sometimes because we get very attached to it. And that's part of the cost. And then there's the cost of being willing to fly His flag in what can be a hostile environment.
So it's Monday morning. You're back at work. And you're standing by the water cooler and a few of your colleagues are around. And someone comes up to you and says, oh, hi, nice to see you. How was your weekend? You say, oh, my weekend was great, thanks so much. Oh, really? What did you do? Oh, I went to the country. Oh, okay. Where did you go? Oh, it's somewhere down near Chichester. Oh, Chichester, I know Chichester. Where were you near Chichester? A place called Bracklesham Bay. Oh, Bracklesham Bay, I know Bracklesham Bay. My parents live near there. Where were you in Bracklesham Bay? We were in a sort of, you know, it's called Richardson's. It's a sort of, you know, it's a sort of holiday camp. You went to a holiday camp, Richardson Place, for your weekend. What on earth were you doing there? Oh, well, I'm on a course. You're on a course? What kind of course is that? Oh, well, it's a sort of... It's very difficult to describe. It's kind of like it was actually it's called an alpha course. Did you say the alpha course? The alpha course. I've heard about that. I've seen all those billboards and things about the alpha course. The alpha course. What exactly is the alpha course? I don't really. Alpha course. What is that? Well, the alpha course. How would you describe the alpha course? It's kind of like it's basically Christian. Here's the good news. They are not going to kill you. They may laugh at you, but that's about as bad as it's going to get in our context. There's some place in the world where they might kill you. Here, that's the worst thing, is that they'll laugh at you. But there may be a cost. Why? Why should we do this? Why should we present our bodies as a living sacrifice? Well, Paul says, in view of God's mercy, in view of everything that God has done for you, Jesus sacrificed his life for you. He loves you so much. He died for you. And our response is to say, Lord, I give you everything. I trust you with everything. I present my body to you as a living sacrifice. And what Paul says is, when you do that, you'll find out what God's will is for your life. His good, pleasing, and perfect will. The devil wants to tell you that God is a spoilsport, that he wants to ruin your life. You can't trust him. If you present your body a living sacrifice, he's going to absolutely ruin it. But Paul says, no, his purpose for you is good. It's pleasing. It will please you. And it's perfect. You cannot improve on God's plan for your life. Because Jesus said, I came that you might have life, and life in all its fullness. And when we present our bodies a living sacrifice, we discover God's good, pleasing, and perfect plan. We discover life, and life in all its fullness, a life of abundance, a life as life is meant to be lived, a life worth living, a life following Jesus.
No, it's been going non-stop.
Turn the heat off, turn it down.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll just open the door.
There you go.
For at least 20 minutes.
It has, hasn't it? It's like.
I think at one time. All right, I tried. Where we go? Yeah.
Yeah, it's extra hot in here. Somebody turned the heat up before we started. That's why it's extra hot in here.
I did. I gotta remember to turn it down before I told you, layer your clothes and you won't be cold. Bernie, sit in Linda's chair. I think that she should sit there. This is a warm spot.
Yeah, it is.
So, first impressions, first thoughts, things that really jumped out at you from this week's lesson.
It was kind of all over the place. Yeah.
Well, them talking about asking people, do you conform, you know, to other people? Yeah, at one time I did. And that's like when I first got into management, I was scared to tell people what to do, you know. And then it finally hit me that if I don't, they're gonna run me, and I'm never gonna make it at my job. So you gotta do it. But likewise, people that just talk about other people or go to people and say, why are you wearing that? Or go to somebody else and say, do you see the car she's driving? You know, they don't know what life or what's going on in their life, that they don't have money to drive a different car. Or maybe they see a priority for their money a different way. And things that people that go up to people and say things to them can be very hurting to that person, you know. And I just don't think you have to conform to somebody that tells you, oh, you should wear that outfit, or you know, this and that. Just maybe do how you feel you should do.
I think sometimes it's even there's a lot of the opposite thing going on. It's not even there. So there is, wow, you know, look at that person. They're driving that, you know, old car or whatever. Wow, look at that person. They've got the brand new car. It's the best. And, you know, they're in debt up to their eyeballs to get that new car. Why? Because they want people to say, oh, they must be doing something right. I had an experience at an interview with our candidacy committee of all places. So to become a pastor in the ELCA, there's the series of interviews and things that you have to do. I got to the very last stage, and I remember this old dude showed up looking like he was wearing the clothes he had slept in. And, you know, this is kind of a big deal. So I wore a jacket and a tie because I thought, you know, important interview, maybe try to look somewhat professional. So all my paperwork in front of me, you know, this is my experience of my internship. Here's my report from my supervisor. Here's my report from when I was doing my chaplaincy work. All of this stuff. You have to write like 17 pages of essays. And this guy just comes in and he goes, I know people like you. And yes, he did talk like that. With your fancy tie and your jacket, you know, you're just all flash. There's nothing there in you that's substance. You know, you just want to look nice, don't you? And I wanted to say, well, where I'm from, when we have something important, we try to look like we didn't just roll out of bed. Like I even like shaved that morning. So that whole idea of, you know, that pressure to conform, you know, it shows up in all sorts of bizarre and disturbing ways. And the thing that bothered me the most about it was then the other 2 or 3 pastors. So first of all, it's like 4 on 1. There's like the 4 of these church people sitting across the table from me. And the other 3, you know, they're supposed to be like advocates and whatever. They just kind of sat back and went, well, that's very interesting. Like, well, thanks a lot. Great. I can see. I'm glad that people are willing to jump in and support. And they wonder, you know, why are people not wanting to be pastors? Well, this is how you treat people when they're trying to even get their foot in the door. I'll stop there, but I'll just say, yes, that whole sort of thing, you know, like, look at that outfit. Yeah, there's people who really just feel like that's a good way to operate.
Or can't afford anything else. You know, and like you said, you know, people that get in debt, you know, to have this really nice car, after they have it, they're no more happier than they were before they got it.
I feel like with me, what you see is what you get. I'm not going to make it sound like I got all kinds of money and that I do this and that. It's what it is. It is. That's the way I feel. And I don't try and conform to everybody else's opinion, you know, what they do. If they got money and they could do it, that's fine. I applaud them.
Well, it seems to me there's a big difference between being a conformist and being just plain rude.
Right.
I don't think it's at all admirable, like your colleague or whoever he was. That's just rude. I wouldn't expect anyone to behave that way.
Neither did I. That's why I was in shell shock.
You know, and I don't think you are conformist by dressing appropriately. I mean, there are certain things that you do in society and certain things that you,
Not in his part of society, apparently.
well, evidently not, but I don't think it's anything to be upset. I mean, if anyone should be upset, it would be the people who didn't say anything, or the person himself who was so. I'm just shocked to know this was an ELCA group.
Oh, yeah.
They
It
do
was
that
part
on
of the
purpose. They do that on purpose.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, society requires a certain amount of conforming.
Yeah.
We follow
Yeah.
laws.
Yes.
You know, there's
Right.
general conventions that we've come up with over centuries, you know, of how to deal with people from one, you know, in situations. So, I mean, to a certain extent, we all conform to something. We also, we like to hang out with people who conform to the same things we do. We don't go hang out with drug dealers and that kind of stuff. We come to church, we come to Bible study. We don't associate with people who don't conform to our standards or our beliefs or, you know, our sensibilities, so to speak. So there's a lot of ways you can conform, but in certain areas, we don't. I mean, we all have different opinions on one thing or another. And, you know, that kind of, you know, when you used to be able to discuss things like about that and differences, it was something that you could, you know, either, you know, get some more knowledge about and maybe change your opinion, maybe not, maybe change someone else's opinion. But we don't do that much anymore. But yeah, we need to conform to a certain amount of things for just in general for society to go forward.
And it seems like the people who think they're not conforming are really conforming. I mean, because they all, well, for example, people who have a lot of piercings and so on. I mean, I think that was originally intended to be non-conformist, but now it's become something that a lot of people.
Mainstream.
Tattoos is a good example too.
Just to be the devil's advocate too.
Look around this room.
Our last,
Female.
yeah, our last study. Who did Jesus hang out with? What did Jesus do? Did he conform? Nope.
He conformed in that he followed the religious laws and encouraged. He said, I come not to change the law, but, you know, to fulfill the law.
Isn't that what we're charged to do, is to not conform to society's customs? We're supposed to give Caesar what Caesar, so follow the law. But we're supposed to follow God first and his rules, because we're supposed to be of the world, not in it, or in the world, not of it. Which
There you
way is
go.
it? I don't remember.
In the world, not of it.
In the world, not of it. So the things that you're saying are the exact things I feel like we're being taught not to do. Like, it's okay if you know who the drug dealer is. I had friends, I come from Calumet City. they did drugs. I told them not to do it, but I didn't disown them because of their choices. That's what we're called and charged not to do. We're charged, Jesus sat with those people. And so we're charged to love one another regardless. That's where I struggle though, is how do you love people that are, you know, the drug dealer, say, if we stick with that theme, right? How do we confront them per se with what they're doing isn't right, but without judging them, like we're not supposed to judge them, but help them get right with God? That's where my struggle comes into play.
Just keep trying if you can. I mean, some people, no matter what you do, I don't think you're gonna get them right with God.
No, nobody's going to get anyone right with God. Jesus is going to do that.
Right.
But yeah, at the same time, if somebody is participating in something that is so clearly harmful to neighbor, how do you engage that person with love in your heart but with kind of the righteous anger that, you know, you're doing something that's harming your neighbor.
Well, even harming themselves.
That would be like dealing with an alcoholic. They have to come to that realization. There's no amount of your preaching to them.
No.
But the other thing that I would be concerned about is us maybe bring it around to a safety issue. Safety for them, but also when they're under the influence of alcohol or a drug, they do things that they normally would not have done. And for them to realize that they've harmed somebody or could harm somebody, then there's your realization that something may have to change. But as far as on what they're doing to their own self, they have to almost reach that.
Well, that's
Hit bottom.
smoking, same thing, they're harming themselves.
You know, I was really struck by what they said in the video about God calls us to follow. God accepts me, therefore maybe I can accept myself. And I know many people who say, and I think there's a lot of truth to it, you know, God welcomes you as you are, but doesn't expect you necessarily to stay that way. And that notion of how do you figure out what the good stuff is so that you know you are not just kind of set adrift from where you've come from. You know, how do we discern? And sometimes you have to dig really deep. You know, what is something good that you can nourish and kind of pull out from people? You know, what is that good thing? And I think maybe a piece of the answer is, how do we discern that? And I think you really need to be in conversation and in relationship with people oftentimes to discover that. I think we've all come across people where, you know, if you think, you know, everybody has some kind of gift, everyone has something good in them, and you just go, I'm not seeing it. I'm just going to trust that it's there, but boy, howdy, I don't know what it is.
But it might be that other people don't realize what they have good inside.
Yep.
Inside.
For sure.
And so, I mean, it's just like what they say, don't judge somebody else if you aren't in their shoes.
That's right.
But yeah, that notion of figure out what the good stuff is, I think that's part and parcel of that top line question there. How do I make the most of the rest of my life? You know, what is the good stuff? You know, whether it's, and I don't think it's always necessarily what am I good at. If I'm really good at selling drugs, you know, maybe that's not something I want to keep pursuing.
I wouldn't tell anybody.
Yes, you would.
No, I wouldn't.
Just like the guy in the video, he was doing all sorts of not such great things in his life, and yet he, you know, sold everything and turned his life around, and you know, all of a sudden he's helping others.
He's using his gifts and talents to help others.
Right. It just took him a while to wake up to that call.
Just like he that's what he said. He had everything.
Yeah.
Everything. But he
But
wasn't
happiness.
happy.
He had everything but happiness.
Does anybody actually know anyone like that? Anybody who, you know, like they have all of the, you know, the stuff that they want, things are good, and they're just unhappy? Because I hear that often. You know, people who have everything, you know, looking in from the outside, and yet are deeply unhappy. I
don't know anybody that has everything, so. I mean,
okay, so that's the starting point.
I'm just being realistic. I mean, I don't hang with that crowd, you know, it's just, you know, I'm not in that area to see it. I think if you spend time with people that do have, wealth and fame and stuff like that, then you might see it. But I don't think, it's once again, just going back to it, I think we tend to gravitate to people that are like us. We don't go and outreach to, wealthy people and say, hey, can I come out and hang with you and talk about my life so you can understand me better? You don't get opportunities to do that. You might have some more opportunities to go down into the city of Chicago and serve meals or something like that. And if that's what you're called to do, or you think that's a good thing, you can do it. But I think that generally people like to gather with people that they are comfortable with, and you're comfortable with people who either have the same values as you do and the same kind of thoughts that you do. So you don't have that mingling. Now, as far as conforming, maybe, yeah, we can conform. Maybe we should conform to what God wants us to do more so than the real world, because there's a lot of things in the real world I have no interest in conforming to. But I separate it.
I don't think totally, Dan. There's people out there that, okay, they don't have it, and then they know somebody that has everything. And they think, oh gosh, I want to have this like them. And they get into debt over their head that they hardly can get out just to be like that person. And it's not gonna work.
No, that's
I think there's a lot of people that, they're constantly looking for more possessions, more things. And until they realize that what they have is enough, they will not be happy.
Well, I have a wealthy friend, and she's Lutheran, but she no longer goes to church because she said, I don't get anything out of it. And I said to her, well, I was always taught it's what you bring to church, the praise and the thanks. But she's like lost. She has all of this wealth and she's not happy.
I think Terry hit on a really critically important point. And that is, how do we understand what's enough? How do we discern? I mean, there is a certain level of whatever term you want to put on. There's a certain level of economic level that you have to have, for survival to happen. And beyond that, how do we determine what is enough? And it might be different for different people. I think I know I sometimes find myself caught up in wanting more, and every now and then something will happen and I'll go, you know what? Well, I think that would be cool or whatever. What I have is enough. This is a very trite example, but I had seen something got me thinking about it. I think I was leafing through my closet here at church, and I thought, I'd really like a new green chasuble, and I know which one I really want. And I went and looked it up online. I was like, oh, they have one on eBay. So I put in my bid, and there were no bids, close to it. And then the next morning, I get an email, you've lost your auction. And I was like, oh man. And then I thought, is this really something that's going to make a positive difference for anybody?
It goes back to that, do I want it or do I need it?
Yeah, is what I have enough?
It depends on who you're comparing yourself with too. If you are with people who have things that you think you want, you're liable to be more unhappy because you don't have them. But if you compare yourself with, well, like we in America compare ourselves with people in the rest of the world, we realize that we really, all of us pretty much are wealthy and, or people who lived in a different age. To think how convenient life is for, well, for most of us. I mean, some of us, of course, are very poor and don't have enough food, but generally speaking, my goodness, to live in a warm house where your furnace comes on, and not have to build a fire, to have a garage door that goes up. I pray for that every day.
This video, the water.
Clean water.
Yeah.
Clean
water.
I think if you just look around your house, actually, and that's what I see. I mean, yeah, you see things that maybe you'd like to have, but I mean, I realize that I don't really need it. You know, I should be happy with what I have because I'm fortunate to have what I have.
No, sold its water utility to a private company.
Yeah.
For a while, we were having a lot of trouble, you know, as the company was digging up pipes, replacing them and so on. Sometimes we would just lose water. Boy, do you appreciate water when you don't have it. Just things like that.
Right. You know, I have people laugh at me because I still have the original flip phone. I don't have a smartphone. I don't need a smartphone.
Jack held out on that for a long time.
$600 to have it. I have very wealthy people in my family. Close. My sibling and my daughter. And I'm so happy for them that they're able to take care of their children, pay for their college, that they're not, you know, burdened with college loans. And I thank God that they have such a good life and but they share what they have. You know, it's not like I want more, I want more. They're just very blessed because their husbands can have very, very, very good jobs. And I'm not a greedy person. I'm not a wanting person. I'm definitely not a conformed person to be in a higher place. And yet it does me more harm than good. I'm happy where I'm at. I've worked my whole life. I worked hard. I raised 5 children and I bless God every day for my life.
But if I look at what I have now compared growing up, I mean, my parents didn't have a lot at all. I feel like I'm in a palace.
Right, that's true. Well, I grew up in the Great Depression, people, where we had absolutely nothing. No electricity, no refrigeration, no nothing. And people today, when I talk about that, they look at me as if you're kidding. They can't believe growing up without all of the wonderful things we do have today.
That we take for granted.
Did you grow up in Africa?
No, in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Illinois.
I was gonna make a comment, I was holding back.
You know, the thing is that we live in a very capitalistic society, which feeds on itself, and you can see it feeding on itself more and more and more. So how does it perpetuate itself? By making people want more. And how many people fall for that hook, line, and sinker, and they just keep doing that, you know, this, that, and the other.
And they never get happier.
No,
well, and the message that you get is repetitive and constant and
exactly
and ongoing. That you know, this is what you need to be happy, and this is what you need to.
And they're not going to stop until they realize they do have a lot and they're happy with what they
So let me throw out a scriptural image here for you, and I think I touched on it earlier, but it's really sticking with me. This idea, how do I make the most of the rest of my life? And it really, I think, plays into that question of, do you feel pressure to conform? Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. Now, like many biblical expressions, it's entered into the wider vocabulary, and it kind of most of the time just means, you know, you're good, solid citizen. Jesus was not really concerned with people being good, solid citizens, but salt Salt has a lot of things that it does. But I think some of the most important things that it does is it adds flavor to food. And I think what I said when I preached on that text a couple weeks ago, God's people are the salt of the earth, in that we are out here to try and make the world's stew more palatable to God. Because, you know, it is a stew. Like, we're all out here together, different things, and, you know, the pressures of life and stuff, they can cook us. But salt is also a preservative. So let's say, for instance, you take a pork belly, you rub it down with salt and let it sit for a while, and then you hang it over some smoldering hardwood chips. So salt has a preservative function. So we as God's people, we are also a preservative. The salt is not like what it gets mixed into, but the salt has a preservative function. And I think for God's people, and I think, you know, a lot of people in Judaism would kind of see it the same way with, you know, people who abide by Torah. There is an ethical component. There is a love of neighbor component that does have a preservative effect in the world. You know, who was at the forefront of the abolition movement to get rid of slavery? There were a lot of church people. Like, people say, oh, well, you know, the church did all these bad things. Yeah, you know, churches have done some bad stuff, but churches have also been the ones who built hospitals and opened universities. And, you know, churches are out there, you know, digging wells in places where they don't have clean water. So there's a preservative effect that salt has in the world as well. Another thing that is often missed is that salt was part of the, almost always offered as a part of a sacrifice in the temple. So salt had a kind of a role in covenant. So, you know, we are that presence of covenant. We are that reminder of God's promises. So that just kind of, you know, I think to me is a reminder that if we are called to be the salt of the earth, you know, that the salt doesn't do anything if it stays in the jar. We as God's people are meant to be out and about among the world, and in some way seasoning the world, in some way preserving the world, in some way being a sign of that covenant. You know, how do we make the most of the rest of my life? You know, what are the good things in my life that can kind of salt the earth? You know, positive sense, not like in a salt the earth so nothing grows there again.
Doesn't the word salary come from salt? That Roman soldiers were actually paid
Salt was money.
in salt.
Salt was money in some cultures, so, you know, it had a value. So if, you know, you could use it and say that, yes, you're the salt of the earth, you all have value.
That's why you should eat
And,
TV dinners.
you know, go from there.
That's a good way to put it.
I think you can, Pastor, I think you can also look at salt in terms of action, because our nervous system depends on movement of sodium inside outside cells to activate.
Yeah.
Catalyst, if you will.
Yeah, if your salt levels get too low, that's not good.
You won't conduct nerve impulses if you don't have salts.
That's a gene that I hope I got from my grandmother. She was having fainting spells, and they eventually realized she needed like horse pills of salt. And I thought, if I got that gene, man, I am set. Some others I hope that maybe skipped over me, though that's definitely one that I hope I got. And she was with it right to the end. She knew to a dime what was in her bank account. So hopefully I get the longevity genes from that side of the family and not the side where everybody kind of loses their marbles. So we'll just have to wait and see. Other thoughts? Other thoughts on how we make the most of the rest of my life?
Something he said about that God won't call you to give up good stuff. You really emphasize giving up trash, and I don't think that's true. Sometimes we're called to give up the good for something better. And that better might be something that we don't see just yet, or it doesn't seem better. So it's not necessarily that well, certainly we're called to give up the trash, but sometimes, and this can be harder, is that we're called to give up something that is good.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes we perceive it as good, but God doesn't.
For something better.
Yeah, well, and I think that's really something to chew on, is that notion of giving up something good for something better. And we as people tend to be very risk averse, just as a blanket statement. One of the things that I learned in the course of my studies, some of the people at the business school were saying, like, they've done studies and they found that the reason why there's so many negative campaign commercials out there, we react more strongly to a perceived threat of loss than we do to a possibility of gain. And they did some sort of study about how people reacted when they said you might lose $20 in this situation versus how you might get $20. The threat of losing $20 got people responding and reacting a lot more than, you could possibly gain $20. I think these were the same people who did an auction of a $20 bill, and they sold the $20 bill for like $49 because people just got into the zone and like, I have to win. But something that stuck with me, and it was one of the first things they said, we all fall short. We all make mistakes. Some of them you can't even call mistakes because you did it on purpose. But the question is not, how bad can we feel about it? The question is, in what way is God going to lead us forward from there? That really caught my attention, and where he said, if God accepts me, maybe I can accept myself.
I used to have a sign on my refrigerator. I kept it there for a long time. Sign just said it was a magnet. God did not create junk.
Yeah.
And I think I kept it there at that time because I needed something positive in my life. And there was things going on that would have been negative, but and heaven knows, if you're in the kitchen, you're in your refrigerator. That helped me refocus with what was going on. God did not create junk.
Well, I don't understand this last question on the first page. How can you present your body as a living sacrifice to God? I need some explanation on that, Pastor.
Well, it comes out of Romans, as they mentioned. I think what I wrote down in my notes here is a piece of one part of offering a sacrifice involves turning over your control or your possession of something. If I'm going to go offer a sacrifice of grain at the temple, I can't go in and say, well, here's my first fruits from my field. Here's my first bushel of grain. And I need you to use it in exactly this way. And I'm going to bring it when I feel like I'm good and ready. And then I will tell you how it's going to be offered or whatever. No, it's offered and with hands open. And I think I'm not going to pretend that I can give you a complete answer to this question really ever, but certainly not in the next 4 to 5 minutes. But I think at least one aspect of it is, can we present our bodies as a living sacrifice? And I think it's important, a living sacrifice. This is not Paul saying, sacrifice yourself by, the same way we would like sacrifice an animal. But I think at least one piece of it has to be, how do we open ourselves up to what God wants to do with the whole of who we are? When we talk about salvation through, we are saved by grace through faith, apart from works of law. Faith is not assent with our brain to a particular, it is not solely assent with our brain to a particular statement of doctrine, but it has to do with how our hearts move and ultimately with how we embody that. So it's not just, your heart belongs to Jesus, but your rear belongs to someone else. Like God is saying, I can work through your whole being. And I think it's opening ourselves somehow to, in what ways can we turn our whole being over to God? I think that's at least one aspect of it.
Pastor, can I?
Of course.
I wrote the question, Dan. My intent was exactly what he said, plus kind of a reflection of what are things that we are not doing as offering our entire body as a sacrifice to God. So maybe we are coming to church every week, but as soon as we hear pastor's sermon and we're like, oh, that's really great. But by the time we hit the car, it's lost. Or
Okay, well, yeah.
What are things that we're not thinking
his
of?
explanation
That's clearly not happening with my sermon.
Oh, yeah, because I just never thought of it in the way of like, a sacrifice is like, accepting the fact, hey, I'm going to say, do with me what you will. And, point me in the direction you want me to go, and I will go. Just getting into that mode rather than, should I? Well, yeah, that would be nice, but I'm not really into that sort of thing. Just getting into that mode where you say, yeah, I see it, I will do it.
That's what that question.
Okay, well now I got it.
Yeah.
I think.
You got it.
Thanks for understanding what was in my head.
Great minds.
Well, in the beginning of this, there was all this talk about sex.
Yeah. Nothing there.
We never brought it up.
No pun intended.
No, but I was taught that sex is between a married man and woman, but nowadays it's almost like casual sex is the night's entertainment. It's just gotten out of hand. It's bad.
People can make a lot of money off of that. I think there's
money isn't everything.
What is it?
It's it's a bizarre moment we find ourselves in. And I think a lot of people either do not see or refuse to believe that, the ways we use, abuse, exploit our bodies and other people's bodies, that can, try not to use the word I really want to use, that can screw up a lot of things. And I think people lose sight of that. And then they're just like, well, gosh, I have this issue and that issue. I'm like, well, maybe that is your brain's way of trying to pick up the pieces from the ways you have used and abused your body and other people's bodies.
Sorry, I brought it up.
No.
Oh, no, not at all.
No,
I was,
you're not.
you know what? Not next week, but the following week, Lindsay will be here. I will be in Crawfordsville. So I'm gonna put that, I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna edit the thing, the study guide and just put down on there, Dottie wants to talk about sex. So I'll give that for No, that's gonna be on Lindsay's copy. 'Cause she'll be here in my stead.
Well, it was weird because it was just, he went into that and then moved away.
Yeah, it was kind of like bam.
Okay,
and
what's
then-
that? Yeah, what's that all about? Yeah.
Well, I think he had to say what he had to say. It's just that people don't live like that no more. That meaning of love and relationships is
we
gone
don't-
out the window.
We don't see it depicted anymore.
Yeah.
There are a lot of
It's
people who
just too
do,
bad. It's too bad.
but that doesn't make for compelling entertainment, so we don't see it depicted in media.
Well, it's more out in the open now. It's premarital sex has been going on forever. It has.
Everything is exposed.
Well, that's, you know, we would be surprised, maybe even our parents, our people, I mean, I'm not saying it's like it
Oh,
is
yeah.
now, like,
Yeah.
you know, people living together and all this and that, but if you learned everything that your parents did too, you might.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Shall we close by praying?
Good idea.
Let us pray. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Well, thank you everyone for being here.
Very interesting.
It was.
morning.
Well, thank you for being here.
And just remember, Daddy, that's on video.
Oh, dear.